Let's take a little time and review solving oblique triangles. Remember, we have three tools for solving oblique triangles. We got the sum of the angles is 180 degrees. We've got the law of cosines, and we've got the law of sines. Lots of different forms of the law of cosines. Two that we could use for sides, for A and B, and a bunch more, or two more for the angle, one for beta and one for alpha. With the law of sines, we have this three-part equation, sine alpha over A equals sine beta over B equals sine gamma over C. We can use this to solve for sides and for angles. When you're solving for a side, you should not be using inverse trig functions. When you're solving for an angle, you should be using inverse trig functions. Always remember that in the law of sines, the opposing information will always be on opposite sides of the fraction. Beta over B, gamma over C, alpha over A. We spent some time breaking things into cases to decide which tool we should use first. When we have three pieces of information, we usually don't have a choice as to which tool we use first. Once we have four pieces of information, then we have a choice of which tool we can use. Usually at that point, we should just switch to the law of sines because it's just a ratio. But if you're super into this, using the law of cosines to find an angle, then by all means, just do that, especially if you have to do it multiple times on a calculator, and you have a calculator, you can just press second enter and then change the numbers around. You don't have to type the whole thing in all over again. But with three pieces of information, you usually don't have a choice of which tool to use. So the subheadings here, if we have three sides, we have to use the law of cosines. You can use the law of cosines to get one angle and switch to the law of sines, or you can just do the law of cosines 3 times and find the 3 angles. Although that would be kind of crazy. Because once you have 2 angles, you should just subtract to find the third. It's not enough of a flex to use the law of cosines for the third angle when subtraction is on the table. If you have 2 sides and the one angle that you're given is the included angle, this will be like the 3 sides where you have a full set. 3 sides is A, B, and C. 2 sides of the included angle would be side A, side B, and angle gamma. Or side A, side C, and angle beta. Or side B, side C, and angle alpha. There's an A, there's a B, and there's a C. With that given information, if we have an A, a B, and a C type information, we don't have an alpha and an A. We don't have a set of opposing information. So we can't use the law of sines. We have to use the law of cosines. At least with 3 sides, we can use the law of cosines to go after any of the angles that we want. When we have 2 sides in the included angle, our only choice is to go after the side opposite the given angle. The other way you can be given 3 pieces of information is to be given 2 sides, but the non-included angle. If you have 2 sides and the angle opposite one of those sides, in our 3 pieces of information, we have an alpha and an A, a beta and a B, or a gamma and a C. That means we have to use the law of sine. The law of cosine is now off the table. What we have to remember is that we are in the ambiguous case of the law of sine. We just need to be aware that there could be two triangles, or that there could be 0, 1, 2, or 1 triangle. So the ambiguous case means we have to be aware that there are 0, 1, 2, or 1 triangles. Once you remember that, you can just try to put take the first angle that you find and put it in quadrants 1 and 2. So the way we deal with this is put the first angle you find in quadrants 1 and quadrants 2. If there are 0 triangles, the first angle you find, you'll get an error on your calculator. You will attempt to find the first angle, out pops an error, a domain error. You say, oh, there are no triangles. I should have calculated the height and found that out. But already now that I know that there are no triangles, I'll just move on. The 2 triangles maneuver is to take the first angle that you find and subtract it from 180, because you'll put that angle in quadrant 1 and quadrant 2 and solve the 2 resulting triangles. If you're in the 1 triangle case, the one oblique triangle, 1 non-right triangle, then that second triangle, after you subtract from 180, you work on the second triangle, the third angle will end up being negative. And you say, oh, dang, I could have checked the side opposite the given angle is greater than the other given side. Therefore, I should have known there was only going to be 1 triangle. Well, I know now. So the most important thing is to recognize when something is the ambiguous case. You'll know it because you're using the law of sines first, and you're looking for an angle. You don't have to memorize all the different combinations. If you're using the law of sines first and you're looking for an angle, that's the ambiguous case. If you have one side and 2 angles, the first thing that you should do is subtract to find the third side. Oh, sorry, third angle. Yikes. Then you can use the law of sines to go after the other 2 sides. Or I guess you could use the law of cosine. Oh, wait, no, not yet. You can subtract to find the third angle. You could also lead with using the law of sines. If one of the angles happens to be the angle opposite the one given side. But as soon as you have 2 angles, you should subtract to find the third. In this case, you don't have to, but you should. So if I give you one side and 2 angles, and you don't start with subtraction, I'm not going to take off points. Probably the worst case scenario is when I'm handing your paper back, I'm like, oh, yeah. But it's not like worth points or anything like that. It's not a mistake. It's just weird. I think there's something. Why don't you just do the easiest thing first? You know what I mean? I just think there's something wrong with you at that point. Not really. It's totally up to you. I could frame that entirely differently. Yeah, you could subtract to find the third angle first if you want to be like those Britney and Justin wannabes. Take your hair off on the side. Fuck that cigarette. But I like to use the law of sines first. Sometimes you won't have a choice. I give you two angles and the side included in those angles. In which case you have to subtract to find the third angle. But you should just do that if you have two angles anyway. Once we have four pieces of information, we get to choose how we proceed. So that's great. We get a choice as to how to proceed. Usually we'll just switch over to the law of sines. It's just ratios and it's easier. So on the good side, we get to choose how to proceed. On the bad side, we have to now choose how to proceed. We like to think that we like lots of choices, but we actually don't. We're too worried about making the wrong choice. Too many choices. More. At the coffee place, it's always for me just a large black coffee, like not even sugar. It's just because every time I want to try something else, I look up at the menu and there's too many things. It's like, oh man, there's no way I'm going to absorb all this information and have my order ready to go by the time I get to the front. You know what I mean? Incidentally, while you're in line, that's the time to make that decision. If you walk up to the counter and then you look up at the menu, there's going to be a bunch of people in line behind you that have their order loaded and ready to go. There's going to be large black coffee. There's going to be tall cappuccino. And then there's going to be oat milk latte, grande, with a sprinkle of cinnamon. They all have their orders like lined up and ready to go. This is not some fancy restaurant where you sit there, well, what do you recommend? And then the waiter like rolls his eyes at you. It's like, oh, well, I like, and then you just pick something, right? That has that ready to go. But anyway, I get up there and there's just too many choices. So I'm like, large black coffee. Because I know it'll get the job done. And I'll be perfectly happy with that. At this point in car history, we don't need all these sedans. All the car companies need to get together. It's like, all right, no one's buying these stupid sedans anymore, except like these really old people. We're waiting for them. But for some reason, they want to trade in their 2014 Camry for a 2017 Camry. So who's going to be making the sedans? And then they all like have a secret vote. And it's like, all right, that's another vote for Honda. Honda, you get to keep making the Accord. Camry, done. Mazda 6, done. All the sedans, they're just all done. You know what I mean? Ford has already said, you know, we're out of this game already. They don't make cars in North America anymore. Except the Mustang. That's it. Everything else is SUV. But really, do we need all these friggin' SUVs? Just pick one that you like looking at. You want it? But there are too many choices. Because let's suppose that you get the Honda CR-V and then you see the Mazda CX-5 going by in that cool, nice red, that metallic red that Mazda has. Oh, I'm missing out. But then if you got the Mazda, you'd be watching the CR-V going by. Oh man, the inside's bigger than the outside because that's what Honda does. Every Honda is like a little TARDIS. They're just really good at using the space inside. You know what I mean? There's too much choice. You're going to be wondering if you made the right choice. If there were two cars, no problem. If the only cars available were sedan and truck, you'd be like, oh, well, I need to haul stuff, so truck. Well, I don't need to haul stuff, so sedan. And that would be it. And no one would ever worry about it. You would lament the fact that there aren't any choices. But then when there are choices, you're like, oh, which one should I get? And then we make ridiculous statements like, oh, this one has better mileage because it gets 25 mpg instead of 24 mpg. I'm like, oh, motherfucker, those are not different mpgs. And that's not what you're going to be getting because I've seen the way you drive. It's foot on the floor all day long. You are going to get crap mileage. You know what I mean? What are we talking about? Oh, yeah, choices. Like if there was like one trig class, then you wouldn't well, that's the class I got to take. If there's only one instructor, if I'm like teaching all the trig classes, wow, that's it. That's the week. Sucks for me, but I mean, at least I know I didn't get it wrong. If there's another trig class out there, I think two more. There might be online ones, CSN, Pinata. And so right now you're thinking, man, I didn't have to do this. What if everybody's having a really awesome time in those other trig classes? But if you knew all trig classes were run by me, and so all the trig classes were equally shitty, then you'd be like, oh, no. You wouldn't be happy with it, but you wouldn't be worried about your choice. Does that make sense? Yeah. You gotta think about these things. How's everybody okay? Pretty much once you have 4 pieces of information, switch to the law of sines. I guess I could have summarized all that with just by saying that. I could have presented it to you as you don't have a choice. Do the law of sines now. All right. Let's take a pause and then come back and we'll talk about some other triangle business trigonometry. Let's take 5.